I think if leadership teams had a single sentence of their strategy for the year and a single goal for the year and just communicated that to their team every week and every month, you'd have incredible success. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat.
This podcast is brought to you by Hey Taco, the only peer-to-peer recognition platform that uses tacos to help teams around the world share gratitude. I'm Doug.
I'm Una.
This is our podcast, Amazing Teams. Eddi Geller, welcome to the Amazing Teams podcast.
Thanks so much, Doug. Really pleasure to be here.
Of course.
Eddi, we're excited to have you. And for our listeners, Eddi is the founder and CEO of SKOR, a company dedicated to measuring and improving corporate culture. Prior to SKOR, Eddi was the co-founder and CEO of Tinybean, a family-centric app designed to safeguard cherished moments. Under his guidance, Tinybeans went public on the Australian Stock Exchange in 2017. And under Eddi's stewardship, it became known for its successful company culture and the app that millions of parents use to this day. Eddi, did I miss anything?
Sounded so good, Una. I almost wanted you to say it again. No, all good. All good. Thanks for having me on the show. Really appreciate it.
Eddi, we'll dive straight into the topic that all three of us like, the amazing team. What do you think it takes to build an amazing team in 140 characters or less?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's important you provided that caveat. Otherwise, I'd be answering this all day. Really, in my mind, it's a range of things, but it starts with empowerment and a big proponent of servant leadership. And really, I believe the role of a leader is to create the environment in which people can really do their best work. So whatever that means. And the other thing that I often found the leader stops short of is not asking enough questions and finishing their statements with a period. So build amazing teams. It's about curiosity, questioning, and empowerment for people to do their best work and find their own journey to deliver great outcomes.
I see Doug smiling. You used a phrase that is near and dear to Doug's heart, which is servant leadership. Am I reading that smile correctly, Doug?
That is correct. And I remember mentioning to you about always ending with a question. And so Eddi saying that just strikes a chord with me.
Eddi, can you tell us a little bit more about SKOR and what you're focused on at SKOR?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting. I mean, I launched SKOR about 7-8 months ago. It's the type of thing that I'm so excited and passionate about because I think I could only get to this spot of SKOR, which I'll explain in a minute, with my past companies and my journey. You can't start with this unless you've had lots of trials and tribulations in building teams and building cultures. So SKOR is a product and a platform we've created to measure culture objectively with a score, as funny as that says. And that's why we created the brand of SKOR, SKOR, because today when you ask organizations and leaders around culture, it's very ephemeral, very fuzzy. No one has a really great definition. It's very subjective. And if you asked most leaders, they would say they have a great culture. And you ask lots of employees, do you think you have a great culture? It would be mixed. And that's the subjectivity of it. So I want to solve the problem of measuring culture and then more importantly, benchmarking it in the industry of what great culture is. So then we can finally convince leadership teams and CEOs to create better environments in which people do their best work. Because I think the last that I saw, 85 million employees in the US are in organizations with poor culture. It is astounding. And a lot of executives actually admit it, but they don't want to make the change because they feel, they don't need to. And I think a lot of it comes down to data and verification and a business case. And that's some of the parts we're doing. But that's the business of SKOR.
Funny enough, Doug, I think I shared this with you before we started recording, but I took the survey or the SKOR survey to see what is our culture like, because Eddi was launching the product and I got an email. And I think one thing that came out to me out of the 3 dimensions was clarity that we needed to work on. And at the time that was very suitable because we just had expanded the team and we were figuring out how do we work together, who does what. Can you share more about the 3 aspects you measure culture on?
Yeah, absolutely, Una. So we call it the 3 C's. So cohesion, clarity, and courage. So cohesion is around the team and connectivity, core values, mission. Is there a sense of discipline and really connectedness with regards to how cohesive that team is? The second is, as you pointed out, Una, is clarity. How clear and aligned is the organization? Is there a single strategy and goal that every single person in the team is united and clearly understands? The classic, which mountain are we climbing? How fast we're climbing it? Should it be that one or that one? That clarity is a big piece that is often just not invested in effectively enough as teams. And the third is courage, my favorite. It's all about assessing how courageous the leadership are in terms of transparency. Do they celebrate failures or do they reprimand them? How safe do the people feel to do their best work? So it's all these aspects of cohesion, clarity, and courage, which connects the dots to basically give organizations a score. So you guys did a great job and obviously performed well. I haven't got the number in front of me, but you guys probably have. But it's all about identifying the gaps and leveling up. So it's so great that you saw the potential improvement in clarity, because it's a big one.
That's great. Eddi, what is one thing leaders get wrong about culture?
I would say that a key part that leaders get wrong that I think that, again, I want to look to solve is that they often believe employees are responsible for culture and contribute and create the culture. And I actually think it's the opposite. Leadership set culture. Leadership set the environment in which people do their best work. So there's a lot of emphasis on employee surveys and data and what all our employees think, and do that regularly. And hopefully we tell them and hopefully we do something about it, although many don't, and just almost like appease them because we're asking them. But they feel that, they need to understand from them what's going on. But frankly speaking, in my experience, it's all on leadership. Leadership set the tone and culture. And the other thing that I find leadership get wrong is that they feel that the simple things are the sort of the important aspect. When I say simple, it's like if they tell people what to do, people will do it, right? It's a much more directive aspect. But I think if you empower and again, lean into much more of an opportunity for people, then they're more inclined to sort of jump in. So again, like for me, it's about leadership are the ones that set the culture. Leadership are the ones that define how people behave. And I think a lot of leadership teams feel that it's really on the individuals, not on them.
Why is it so hard for leaders to make the change then?
It takes courage, and courage is linked to ego. People feel that if they're not, I guess, effectively, having this aspect of their behavior that grounds them in like confidence and success, then they won't feel good about themselves. Another thing is that, again, leadership comes from so many aspects. Vulnerability is a big one. People think being courageous is having all the answers and not asking for help. But as you know, actually being courageous is asking for help, is to be vulnerable and say, hey, I don't know the answers. Let's find out what our team thinks and get them to solve the problems for us. So I think it's so opposite. And I think a lot of leadership teams, frankly, think that they have the answers, and they're almost fearful and kind of, frankly, insecure by empowering the teams to come up with the answers. But I think, again, that leads into the courage. I mean, it's a classic, and there's so much literature on this, like you want to put smart people around you. But I think there's a second part to that sentence. Smart people around you and have them solve your problems, right? Because like ask them the questions, lean into curiosity, have them solve problems. But I think leaders struggle with almost like disarming themselves with having to have all the answers, and they should be rearming themselves with the questions so their team comes up with the answers. And I think a lot of leadership teams, a lot of leaders fall into their being a boss in previous lives and think that their approach works, but many data points suggest it doesn't.
Eddi, help me understand how we ended up in a world where culture building ended up in HR teams.
It's crazy. I think about this all the time. I almost think that it's kind of an easy answer because HR typically have huge empathy. Well, they have. I mean, not typically. They all have huge empathy, so they relate to people. And the CEO and leadership teams don't necessarily have strong empathy and don't necessarily relate to people. They may have incredible product visions, incredible strategies, incredible salesmanship, like whatever the case may be, but they struggle with the people side. So it's like, let's get someone who can help on the people side and they will throw the challenge to them. But as all of us know, leadership is actually in every single person. It's not a HR problem, it's an every person problem, and every person's a leader. So I don't know, as part of the solve I want to have with SKOR is I want HR to be considered a strategic profit center, not a necessary cost center. Like another thing that I struggle with is like, speak to some CEOs and they're like 60, 70, 80 people. They're like, oh, I think I should get HR now. What? Like now you should get someone when you have 80 people in the company to help you with people? Like that should be like employee number 5, frankly, like number 10. So because it's a muscle you want to be investing in, but that's what I want to change. I want really to use SKOR to benchmark and then elevate the importance of people so leadership teams and CEOs can elevate and prioritize someone in people to help them, help support the CEO. Because I agree, it's not an HR problem, but I certainly think the right talent person can advise the CEO effectively.
Eddi, you mentioned earlier that if you had not had the entrepreneurial and leadership experience, it would have been hard to jump into something like SKOR to coach others. Yep. What have you learned as a CEO and entrepreneur for all these years that you now advise other CEOs on?
There's so many. God, I have lots of scars, lots of learnings extensively. And look, I mean, I don't know if there's any one particularly that comes to mind because so much of it connects with some of the things I've said in terms of servant leadership and teamwork. I mean, it's just that whole learning, especially, I mean, my first business, I was 24 when I started it. And, I think half the people I hired were, if not more of the people I hired were older than me. So you have to learn the hard way. You got to lean into other people helping you answer that. And I was brought up in an environment in which both my parents were entrepreneurs. My mum, a successful one, my dad, an unsuccessful one. He lost a business and lost a house. I saw lots of failure around me, when I grew up. And that taught me a lot about, you can't have all the answers. You got to really disarm yourself from the ego and really lean into people helping you solve problems. And I think that sort of helped me learn as a leader. I made lots of mistakes, but I was comfortable in the mistake that I could learn and move on from it. And I think that's also, I often see leaders and they struggle in that almost like showing their teams that they've made a mistake or screwed up. And I actually think them leaning into that failure and celebrating that is the powerful tool that they should be utilizing. So I think lots of different learnings and lots of, I think people I hired schooled me. And then I'm a sucker for good books, I guess, and systems. I mean, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the system called The Great Game of Business or Scaling Up. We implemented that and I learned a lot about just how companies build teams and engage their people and empower their people. And again, through those learnings, just continue to apply that across my businesses and now help others do the same.
Do you enjoy being the player or the coach?
Great question. I think it depends on context. I love being the coach when I have a vested interest in their outcome. I struggle being a coach and coming back on every couple of months and then nothing's changed. I struggle. It was interesting. In between my first and second business, I had a couple year hiatus of figuring it out while I helped some businesses and I was doing coaching and I coached a bunch of CEOs. And after 6 months, I wasn't enjoying it at all because I found every time you sort of work with them, you come back a month or two later and nothing's being done. So I'm like, I have to be the player. I need to sort of help them do the things that I'm telling them they should be doing. So it's almost like a frustrated coach, right? So in that scenario, the frustrated coach, whereas some of the clients I'm working with now, I have a vested interest in their outcome in terms of their performance. It's ongoing. It's not just one-off. I get to meet the leadership team, help with workshops, help with their realities and see their results. So although I don't have a financial interest, I have just a personal interest in their success. I'm far more enthused by being a player coach. So I think it depends on the environment. But having said that, I love learning from others. I think everyone becomes kind of my coach at the same time, although they're not necessarily labeled coach, because I think there's so many situations that is so unique that sometimes you don't even realize. But my 16-year-old schools me every other week, and he's my coach sometimes, depending on situation. So I think it's just about the situation rather than always being a player, always being a coach. For me, I've learned that to just lean in and embrace the situation regardless and learn from it.
That's really interesting. As Una mentioned, I have interest in servant leadership. Can we just talk about that for a moment? Maybe some ideas for others who aspire to be more of a servant leader?
Yeah, absolutely. At a high level, the way I define servant leadership is creating an environment in which people succeed. And if people are not succeeding or for whatever reason, it's on me. And I'm not their boss, I'm their servant. And it's funny, as you asked me the questions, reminded me of when we were at Tiny Beans. Every time we had a new employee, this is the days of in-person in office, right? So a few years ago, every time we had a new person start on a Monday morning, we'd have sort of this morning tea ritual, 11 a.m. You would organize some, coffee, cakes, and just some drinks so people get to know this new team member. And we'd go around the room and people would say, how long you've been here, your role, and something about you. We obviously get to me and everyone knew as a CEO, but I would never say that. I would say, hi, I'm Eddi. And my job is to create the environment in which you are successful. That's it. That's my job. And I think the last aspect of servant leadership that I think is so critical that I think some ignore is that when things go wrong, it's actually on you, not on the person. There's clearly learning, there's clearly failures, but it's got to be on you. Is it not enough resources, not prioritization, they didn't have a skill set, it was the wrong setup, like whatever, but lean in and learn and embrace the failure and embrace the learning. And that's all part of servant leadership. For me, it's all about creating the environments people are successful and people feel comfortable in knowing that's the job of the CEO, because some people struggle with that.
Do you mean, Eddi, some teammates struggle with that or some CEOs struggle with that?
Many CEOs struggle with that for sure. No, individuals I found, I don't know, maybe it's just the culture here in the US that I learned, because obviously being from Australia, it's definitely a whole, although we speak the same language, there's definitely different cultures and nuances. I'm sure you've seen it all. But I found with some people on the team and Tiny Beans here in the US, they'd struggle to even approach the CEO because they had a label of the CEO. It's almost like natural intimidation. And I worked really hard to go, I'm just another guy. Like, I just want to help you succeed. Like, hit me up for anything. I'm here for you. And I really worked hard to make everyone feel that I'm just another person. I unpacked the dishwasher, like I cleaned up after meetings. I put my chair in. Like, I want them to know that I'm just another human wanting to contribute towards a greater good at this company to build something we believe in. And some people got it straight away. God, a lot of people struggled. But you're the CEO. Like, why are you doing that? Like, are you sure I can talk to you? Like, what? Whereas in Australia, no, everyone's together. Like, doesn't matter what your role in. Like, we all chat and joke and hit each other up regardless of the role. And I found that was a bit of a struggle here, that I reached out to people and they wouldn't respond to me, being scared of what I would say as the CEO. And it sort of blew my mind.
I love that. I'm curious about your journey building your businesses. I've been working on my business for 8 years, very much founder-led. I'm curious how you built your businesses. Was it something that you just raised money, built a team? Can you shed some light on your journey building your businesses?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So my early days, that this is going to be, it's part of my journey. So I think it's important to share. My first business, I was 21. Internet was just coming out, 1996. I started a company called Eddi's Internet Solutions because all my friends wanted the internet. And I remember printing these flyers, putting them underneath these windscreen wipers at the train station. And it would say at the top, access the information superhighway, right? To get connected to the internet, 1996. But it sort of shaped me in how I sort of built, and it was just me, right? Eddi's Internet Solutions. But through that, I learned a lot about websites and development and back-end programming. And then that what brought me to my first company, 1999, Unique World, setting up websites for people. So it was just me at the time. And then I had actually my brother-in-law, who wasn't brother-in-law at the time, get involved with the business early on because I was a tech person. I didn't really understand a lot about business and finances. So anyway, so grew that, got investors on board, and then ended up, we had some scary times though, Doug and Una. Like, I reckon 3 times we nearly went out the back door. I remember once having to put the house on the line to bankroll it, to pay salaries the next day. I learned there's the public truth and there's the deeper truth. And there's a lot of deeper truths that aren't public, and a lot of people see the only the public one and go, oh, like, what an incredible journey. It's all been super successful, but we all know it's super tough. But I learned through, again, lots of ups and downs, and I had investors involved there, but I started on my own. And Tiny Beans was a B2C app, so we needed money. We couldn't build anything without it. So we definitely went with investors first. Lots of pain and suffering through ups and downs of investors. It's a whole nother podcast of what I'll do differently next time. But you'll learn a lot and embrace the failures. We had some great success. We built a great brand. But this latest venture, SKOR, no investors, no board, just me, and I'm loving it. And I don't intend to bring on board investors or a board or anything. And I'm happy to go slow. Like, that's totally okay with me, because I went fast in a couple of other times. And I think this business for me and this brand, I want to build really methodically. And I don't need investors at all. I need focus, energy, and working with the right people. So again, each one a different path though.
Starting full circle from Eddi's Internet Solutions, now back to Eddi's Culture Solutions.
I couldn't think of anything better, right? But I've learned a few more things in branding and marketing, thank God, since then.
I kind of like that. Eddi's Culture Solutions.com.
just for fun,
Exactly.
go down to Grand Central, put it on cars. You never know. People are not doing offline advertising anymore.
You never know. Well, to be honest with you, I mean, the learning, and that's some of the genesis of creating SKOR, is I wanted to be part of the vernacular. Like I wanted to be part of the conversation. So like my vision is every time you have a podcast guest on, you're going to ask them in your first question, like, what's your score? And they're going to say, oh, it's 75 and we're leading the industry because that's 65 and that's what we're doing about it. Like that would be amazing. That's the vision, that it becomes as part of the vernacular. It's on company about pages. It's verified, it's part of the conversation. Whereas today there's no measure of it. So, and that's the whole premise of creating a brand that's so simple and direct as SKOR.
Eddi, can you tell us more about the State of Culture report?
Yeah, absolutely. Just for everyone's benefit, the first quarter this year, March quarter, was our first release of the State of Culture report for SKOR. And it's basically a way to compare cultures across industries, in short. So it's to elevate how leaders and leadership teams drive culture across different industries, which industries have a higher propensity towards great cultures or which ones don't, and some interesting insights to sort of convey publicly. Because today there isn't something out there that does a State of Culture report, and we want to be a thought leader in this space, not just basically a barometer tool. So in terms of, that's the high level. How we got the data, I guess lots of begging, borrowing, and stealing from networks and relationships, and really you're going to conferences, inviting people to complete it on LinkedIn, and using just my network and then them extending it to other networks. So the first State of Culture report had 140 companies take the assessment. So it's decent enough. We really want it to be significantly larger as we continue to scale the business. Again, for us, it was about just our first foray into like leading the space and really trying to put this on the map. And a key part of culture and the culture report we wanted to elevate is the business case for culture. Organizations think about culture as sort of sometimes this sort of thing we do sometimes, and it just kind of happens. And maybe, Doug, to your point, sort of HR does that occasionally. It's got to be everywhere. And I really want to elevate the financial benefits of culture and really educate CEOs and leadership teams about how much financial benefits they can generate by having great cultures too. And that's all part of the State of Culture report strategy.
Was there anything in the report that you found alarming or interesting or surprising?
Look, I mean, there's some obvious ones and I'll share some surprising ones. Obvious ones like environment and sustainability was high in a range of different factors. I think their score was like a 74, 75. And logic suggests, well, yeah, because there's an innovation element, there's creativity, you want to find new ways in which you want to apply practices. So there's a safe, courageous high score, right? So you think that, yeah, that's kind of logical. But tech was in the middle. You think tech would be high. So tech is high on courage, but low in clarity. Funny how are you both, because leadership teams feel they're like, oh, everyone knows what we're doing. But they actually do sometimes the worst job in conveying and communicating the clarity around strategy and numbers because they have more propensity to change strategy fast. This isn't working. Let's move to something else. Okay, this isn't working. Let's move to something else. And they feel like they don't kind of need to communicate to the team. That was another interesting insight with tech. And then manufacturing, which you thought would be high in innovation and courage, was not. So again, pretty low scores across them all. And look, I mean, one, again, just to bookend the insights, the weakest one, but again, you probably could predict, was construction. Just very old school approach, very, not much in innovation, not much in clarity, and not much in cohesion. It's like, hey, you want a job? Come work for us. Not much aligned in core values or anything like that. So that'd probably be the highlights overall. But look, I mean, I think as we get a larger data set over time and continue to build upon it, we'll have more insights. But I thought some of those are pretty interesting.
Eddi, I'm curious about tactical things people can do to advance each of those areas. So if you were to offer one tip, it could be as generic, because of course it depends on the context and what the specific score is in a particular company. But if there was one thing people can do today to advance courage, clarity, and cohesion, what would that be?
I started with cohesion because I think that's a lot about core values and behaviors. The core values is really a massive opportunity for organizations. And I find a lot of organizations invest in maybe creating their core values and maybe have a one page or maybe it's on the wall somewhere, etc. And they kind of stop. They think the box is ticked. But I think if leadership teams would really lean into the core behaviors, starting with them living it first, I think that's often a big challenge. So tip number one, live your core values and recognize, and I wasn't paid for this plug, using a great tool like Hey Taco on the core values, I think is so masterful, because one tactic that I learned is really powerful is not only leadership team recognizing values, but your peers recognizing you for the core values. And I think if you recognize the core values using a tool, that's super easy. And I think it can build incredible muscle for the right behaviors. That's tip number one. On the clarity, if the leadership team could just convey the strategy for the year in one sentence and the single most important goal for the year, that's it. And convey it and repeat and repeat and repeat. Just tell the whole team what's the strategy for the year, i.e. which mountain we're climbing, and two, what's the goal for the year, the single most important goal for the year. It's a really important part of it. And the third piece is all around courage and transparency. I think one thing, if the leadership team could just lean into things aren't going well or a failure and how they share and report that failure or set of results, I think that would be great, just the transparency.
Eddi, question for you on the three tips you offered and how you work with your clients. So you come in, you help them measure culture, and then you help them think about what's the gap and how do they get to where they want to get to. What could people be doing in each of the three C's right now to advance on those areas? That's more kind of context independent. So one tip that you would recommend everyone do right now.
All right, fantastic. So 3 C's, cohesion, clarity, and courage. So on the cohesion part, I think leadership teams can really embrace their core values much more effectively, and not just about having it on a piece of paper or you're communicating it once, but really living it. And the other piece, and again, I wasn't paid for this recommendation, but Hey Taco is an incredible tool for peer-based recognition. Really, I think we used it super successfully at Tiny Beans. It was a huge benefit of core values and cohesion. So just peer recognition on core values. The second piece is clarity. I think if leadership teams had a single sentence of their strategy for the year and a single goal for the year and just communicated that to their team every week and every month, you'd have incredible success. Rinse, repeat of strategy and one goal for the year. And on courage, if the leadership team were able just to lean into some failures, some not so great results, and transparently share that with the team, would build trust and engagement. So they're the 3.
Those are perfect. I was just taking notes. Those were great.
Awesome. Good to hear.
Eddi, I have to ask, you have an impressive resume on LinkedIn. Your About section is just, I read it and I was like, wow, Eddi seems like Superman. But I got down to the bottom and I see a mention of Spartan endurance racing, and that really piqued my curiosity. What's that all about?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a sucker for punishment, both physically and emotionally. I don't know. So there's a type of racing called Spartan racing. You go to Spartan.com and check it out. And I've been racing probably for the last, 5 years. I've done 13 races. And what they are is basically endurance racing with obstacles. So you can do the sprint, which is like a 4 mile, a super, which is 8 mile, and the beast, which is like a half marathon, 15-mile one with obstacles. Yeah, I've done them for years. Actually, coincidentally, we've got the sprint, which is a short one in a few weeks, doing it with 3 of my boys and a bunch of buddies. And it's an incredible activity, incredible race that I would encourage anyone to do. And it's not about time. People go, oh, I could never do that. Like, everyone could do it. It's just about having the sense of achievement. And the reason why I want my kids to do it and I do it is because in life, we get hard things and hard things are thrown at us. I want us to build muscles to overcome them. And a race like this is hard. And in the race, there's a ton of hard things in it that I want people to learn how they can overcome it. I'm a big fan. So if you guys are up, we got a race in a few weeks.
I would be terrified because I'd imagine there's a lot of training that goes in before you go and show up.
Well, you could, but I mean, I brought buddies along who are still my buddies who have not done training and did the race with us. Any training is great. No training is also great. We all stay together. It's not about the time. It's about doing something together as a team.
I love that.
Eddi, are those the races where there's an electric wire that you have to crawl underneath?
Yeah, things like that. Yeah, that's an example obstacle. Yes. So often people know Tough Mudder is another brand, Spartan or Tough Mudder. So it's very similar. So things like that, you go under barbed wire, you crawl in mud, you're lifting sandbags up a quarter of a mile up a steep hill and then down, like all different crazy things. But again, at the end when you finish, it's just really quite special. So definitely worthwhile doing.
We had a guest a few weeks ago who said two things that resonated. He said teams that eat together, stay together. And then a derivative was teams that sweat together, stay together.
I love
it. Sounds like this is a great team building for your family team to stay together.
Yeah, no, really good. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, breaking bread, sweating. And actually just on that, my eldest, he rows crew. He rowed crew for years. And something special about everyone in the boat rowing at the same time. So many connections to business and teams, right? In terms of just alignment and being in the same and going through hard times together. So much element there. So I love it for sure.
Eddi, I have to ask you one more question before we go into gratitude, but we know that this is helpful to teams, right? Doing hard things, breaking bread, all these things that connect humans. Why do we forget that when we get into a work environment? It seems like that sometimes we throw everything out we know about humans and motivation and how teams get formed, and then forget about it as soon as we're supposed to be professional.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it comes down to the leader and the leadership team, because I think so many environments have just been bad. So many environments in which it's dog eats dog, highly political, posturing, positioning, people feel unsafe. If people are unsafe, they won't do their best work and they're going to be very guarded. And I think when people join teams and companies where the environment's safe, welcoming, with compassion and with transparency, then people will be much more inclined to be part of a team. But I think so many just environments that have come from, I don't know, leadership teams and environments. And maybe it's also a question of what their first job was. Their first job and more importantly, their first manager will probably also influence how they're like in their career. Their first manager is welcoming, supportive, and conducive to work together. I think they'll probably have that default in every environment. If their first manager was very dogmatic, very aggressive, and very direct, and they wouldn't feel safe, my inclination would be that's probably going to be how they are over time, unless they've had leadership training and self-awareness support. But I think it just has to do with too many bad environments that together we're going to fix, but that's the history.
That's great. I think we should slide into gratitude. As you're aware, Eddi, with Hey Taco, everyone has 5 tacos to give each day, and you can give those tacos to people to recognize them for something they've done or to show your appreciation. Who are you giving your 5 tacos to today and why?
5. So I know that was the world of tiny beans. It's a great question. So I guess today, literally today, I guess you guys, first taco, thanks so much for having me on the show. Super appreciate and really grateful for what you guys have built and the product you guys have and the impact you have out there. So definitely number 1. Number 2, I guess my wife. I got up with her this morning. I got up super early to take our youngest to school. So the second one goes to her. I'll cheat and give the third one to all 4 of my boys, although that's probably a bit cheating, but every one of them is truly inspiring for me in different ways. And, I love hanging out and spending time with them and going through the trials and tribulations together. The 4th taco probably goes to a team member of mine that used to work with me at Tiny Beans. Her name's Grady Edelstein, but she's now helping me at SKOR. I just love working with her there, and now she's helping me at SKOR, and super fun to sort of get together and do it. And probably the 5th taco would go to your listeners, because I think that the fact that they're supporting amazing teams and really appreciate the need to really embrace all the things you talk about, they all deserve one as well.
That's terrific. Well, Eddi, thank you for being on the Amazing Teams podcast. And thank you for all of your support over the years. Really appreciate it.
For sure. I mean, it's a real pleasure. I mean, when Una shared with me the opportunity to come on board, I was definitely super excited and appreciative and grateful for being invited, Doug. And as I said, like super supportive of you guys, and really hope to continue to support you guys as you build something really impactful and large.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eddi.
Thanks for that.
Thanks for listening. One of the important things about building a team is gratitude. If you're looking to add more gratitude into your team, check out heytaco.com. We are clearly biased, but it really does work. Use the code AMAZINGTEAMS to receive 15% off for the first 3 months of your subscription.